Hello, world. Kirsten Hagland here. Welcome to this week's episode of Weekly Hope. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. And for those of you who are coming back and you've been a part of a Weekly Hope episode before, you know the drill. You know how this goes. You also know our unofficial co-host of the show is my lovely little nugget, Miss Elsa. She is here today. She's actually she's like a little freaked out right now because you know what I did right before we started the show? It's funny because I do these shows from one of the places that I live. I bounce around between a couple places right now, but one of the places I'm living in Zurich in my apartment. So see this clothes back there? Yeah, that's it. There was a closet door there up until about 5 minutes before we started. And I was trying to move it in front so you can see the jackets hanging up, and I thought it was standing still. It was not. It crashed onto the floor and broke. And I have a mirror broken into 1,000 pieces right to my left. Freaked Elsa out naturally. Freaked me out. I didn't have time to clean it up before we started. So you'll just have to forgive the jackets in the background. But perfectly imperfect in every way. Just to give you a little behind the scenes of the show here. But what we do, if you're new, if this is the first time you're joining us, here at Weekly Hope, I bring on clinicians, professionals who treat eating disorders, advocates, authors, people with their own recovery stories to come and share their wisdom. And every week we have a different topic. We delve into different things. And if you are interested after you watch the show and you're like, hey, I really, really love that, that connected with me a lot, and you want to go back and watch previous episodes, you can absolutely do that on our Facebook page in the videos section. Also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and all of our previous Weekly Hope episodes are there as well. We started in June, end of May, so there's lots of really great content if that's something that you are interested in. Also, throughout the broadcast, before I introduce my guest, just want to let you know, feel free to introduce yourself. Let us know in the comments your name, where you're signing in from. We have guests that watch this show from all over the world, and so we welcome you, and we just want to hear from you. So, and this is also really an incredible opportunity to share and to ask questions of our incredible guests. They're all super open, very friendly, and as you'll see, just really funny and great human beings. So they're very much open to hearing from you and taking your questions. So that's what we do here. That's what Weekly Hope is all about. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest for today. She's joining me on the screen there, and we're welcoming Wolfe Blum. And so Lee is a keynote speaker. She's a mental health practitioner in the field of eating disorders, of course, and the author of Table in the Darkness, her first book, A Healing Through an Eating Disorder, and the recent Brave is the New Beautiful, Finding the Courage to Be the Real You. She lives in Minnesota with her husband and her 3 teenage boys. So I know, Lee, you have a much more extensive bio than that, but just a little window into you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. It's awesome.
Yeah. Are you in Minnesota right now?
I am. I'm in my house. My kids just went back to school yesterday, which I'm so glad about, to have some peace and quiet.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. Especially with 3 boys. How old are they?
3, 14, 16, and 18.
That, no, thank you.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
We call it the frat house.
Seriously. Well, we're going to get to that in a minute, because I thought, as I was thinking here about questions that I wanted to ask you, I'm going to ask a few questions about how you raise boys. But diving, yeah. But of course, diving right in, you struggled and recovered from an eating disorder. You've written about it extensively. You speak about it all over the country. But for those who have not heard about your story and your journey, why don't you give us a little insight into what that struggle looked like for you, and of course then what motivated you to write about it in your first book?
Well, my growing up, I really struggled with shame and feeling not good enough, which I really, in the work that I do at the hospital and with patients, I really feel like that's the underlying theme of eating disorders, is this kind of not feeling good enough, this deep shame. I grew up in a household where I was constantly told I was the accident, or that I was, my dad would say, oh, tables aren't made for five. Well, there were three of us. So that meant made our family five. So I always kind of felt like I was the outsider and really struggled from early on, not feeling good enough. And then as I went off to college, I had some difficulties growing up in my family life, but when I went to college, my puberty was late, and so when I went to college, I started gaining weight, whereas most people gain their weight from puberty in high school. And I came home, and somebody had said to me, "Look who's gained the freshman 15." And I took that as, oh, here I am again, not good enough. I was really in this place in my life where I was constantly striving for perfection. So I was like, oh, I can totally fix this, right? So as a lot of us do when we're in college, I went on a diet. The thing that I didn't realize at the time was I was really struggling with depression as well. So depression and a diet combined with a family history of addiction and alcoholism, I was ripe and set up for an eating disorder. So I started dieting, and I got to the point where I couldn't stop, and it became a drug for me. It became kind of a way, I know now it became a way for me to numb out. I didn't understand the emotions I was feeling. So not eating and exercise, it really, for me, it wasn't about shape. It was that's how it started because somebody had said that, but it really became about not feeling. And then I was admitted to a treatment center, and this was in the early 90s. And back then they'd send you to a psych ward, which, as we know, often psych wards, you can just not eat. So I continued with my eating disorder. I was able to actually to go and run in the basement of the psych ward. I was able to use behaviors, and then was transferred then finally to an eating disorder facility. At that point in time, there were some key things that happened. And one is the nurses and the doctors would say to me, you will always struggle with this, which I do not think is a very helpful thing to say. It made me feel hopeless. It made me feel suicidal. This will always be something you struggle with. Well, great. What do I do with that? And then I didn't know anyone. The internet wasn't out back then. And I had never met anyone who'd recovered from an eating disorder. I'd never heard of anyone recovering from an eating disorder. All I knew was Karen Carpenter, who died from an eating disorder. So I had this seed in my head, like, if I ever recover, I am going to be damn sure I write about it, because nobody should have to go through treatment and think what I thought, which is, I'll always struggle with this. So what ended up happening, I continued to struggle. I continued to have one foot in the eating disorder and one foot in life, which you can't do, and ended up attempting to take my own life. Ended up in the ICU unit of a hospital. And really, it was at that point, this kind of crossroads, where I really realized recovery, nobody was going to do it for me. That I kept wanting this like magic wand. I kept wanting God to heal me. I kept wanting it to go away. And what I didn't realize was that I needed to make the choices to do what I needed to do to recover. And did I believe, and I have a faith in God, and I really felt like God was saying, are you going to live over here and live this life that the world is telling you are? Or are you going to step out and be the person I made you to be, including the size I made you to be, and do the things that your treatment team is telling you to do so that you can start living the life you're meant to live? And I started to do those things. And that was 23 years ago. And I have been living in recovery. And I will say, I'm living in recovery. Does that mean that I could go back? Sure. But I make the choice, meaning that I didn't choose to have an eating disorder, but I now know that it's a part of something that I could easily fall back into, but I do everything possible in my life to protect my recovery, because you couldn't pay me money. You couldn't pay me $1 million to go back to what that was like. Oftentimes in the work I do, patients will ask me, they'll say, don't you get triggered by being here at the hospital? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'd never want that life again. There's nothing triggering about seeing you miserable. There's nothing triggering about watching you use food as emotions, So I just want people to understand and to know that recovery is absolutely 100% possible for everyone. And you have to do the work to get there. Eating disorders are not choices, but recovery absolutely is a choice, and one that you have to make, just like an alcoholic has to make the choice every day to not drink alcohol.
Yeah. And actually that's something that I was thinking of 1,000 questions when you were talking. And, recovery obviously looks very different for everyone, and very different depending on from which eating disorder or combination you might be struggling with. But for everyone, there's one piece of the recovery process that is harder than others. Maybe it's body image and learning to accept your body shape and size. Maybe it's learning how to feel and sit with those more difficult emotions. For me, I was all those things. Also, it was the fear foods were really, really, really hard to face. There's also facing the identity without an eating disorder. The possibility that this isn't in your life anymore is simultaneously incredibly freeing and wonderful, and at the same time terrifying.
Right.
What was the hardest? Because you talked about making the choice.
Right.
It's like rent is due every day. You got to pay the bill every day.
Right.
What was the hardest part for you?
Well, it's funny. A couple of things, though, as you were saying that. I think a couple of things. You're exactly right. Recovery is different for everyone. And even when I wrote the book, I wanted to make sure that people understood that this is just my story, so that they could find themselves in my story, but not that my story is a recipe for recovery. Because what I found, I've been working at the hospital for 12 years, and what helps one person isn't the same for the next person. So the goal is to continue to lead the people to water. And then when it all works, it works. But I've never seen like one recipe for what works. You know what I mean? So everybody's journey is different. My hope is that you can hear my story and find pieces of it that will help you. And I would say the fear food piece, this is the best part about having an eating disorder and then being on the other side of it, is that my joy when I go and eat a donut is probably 10 times more than the average person, right? Because I'm like, I can do this. I can eat a donut and I love it, because I remember there was a time when eating a donut was the most terrifying thing in the world. Or, now that I have teenagers, we eat pizza all the time. And I remember a time in my life where pizza had so much power over me. So there is great joy on the other side, because if you've been in that dark place, when you get to the other side of it, you know what that dark place was like, and the freedom feels so much sweeter. And then I would say for me, the hardest part, and the part I still continue to work on, is having my emotions. My eating disorder was for sure there because I wasn't allowed in my family system to have emotions. You weren't supposed to feel, you were just supposed to look pretty. And so having emotions for me and knowing that it's okay to be human and have emotions was probably the hardest part of being able to say, I'm sad and it's okay. Or I'm having these thoughts, or I feel not good enough. All of those things, I think, were what was underneath the coping mechanism of an eating disorder. And then also, I think in my second book, Brave is the New Beautiful, I write a lot about being comfortable in my own skin and being comfortable with the person I am. I grew up with people telling me, you're too loud, you're too dramatic, you talk too much, you need to be quiet. And so part of recovery for me has been, no, this is who I am, right? Like, yeah, there's a time and a place when I do need to be quiet, but accepting that the person that I am is okay. And not living in this life of, I'm not good enough, I have to try and be better, and just accepting who I am. And what I have found, the more I accept who I am, the more I can celebrate other women and accept who they are, you know. But when I'm not accepting of me, that's when I start getting very like, oh, well, she should do this and she's this and she's that. But when I step back and I say, you know, I'm okay with me, then I am much more okay with you. And I'm less jealous.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say hello to some of our guests here. Sarah has popped in and said hello. Sarah joins us pretty much every week. So Sarah, it's so great to see you back here. Thank you so much. And also my dear friend Karen says hello. Hi, Karen. Elsa says hi too. She knows that too. So it's so great to see you guys on here. Thank you so much. And you know, it's funny, when we were talking about fear foods and things, I thought of Elsa, and I thought of her and how animals. Oh, Denise Robertson also says hi. Hey, Denise. Good to see you. I also thought how animals, like, sometimes, don't you wish, I just look at her sometimes when she's laying out in the sun.
Yes.
Or just wandering around the house, eating my socks, or when I go to feed her and she just runs, whatever, and they just all by intuition, and they just enjoy. Like, they just don't think about it. Like, they're hungry, they eat, and then she stops when she's full. And I'm like, gosh, wouldn't that be a great life?
Well, and kids are like that. Watch a little kid, you know, they, in raising children, you know, I did it very differently than my parents did. So with my kids, I would always say, tell me what your tummy says. And my son would say, my tummy says it's full. I'm like, okay, then you stop eating. Like, that's intuitive eating. But what happens is we somewhere along the way get it all mixed up. Yeah. And really, we're born intuitive eaters. But it's so hard, our society, and if you've had an eating disorder, or if you've lost your hunger cues, you know, you no longer are able to be like the dog who's like, I'm full, I'm not hungry anymore, which is our natural. That's how we're made to be. We're born. Nobody's born wanting to lose weight. Nobody's born, you know.
Elsa, you don't need to lose weight. You're perfect just the way
Elsa, you are beautiful.
I'm sorry. I'm such a nerd when it comes to animals. So yeah, it's so good. And so Lee, you talked a little bit about the emotional underpinnings of the disease. And this is something that I try to emphasize whenever I talk to people who really have no experience with, or it can't really relate to eating disorders, because they say, why doesn't someone just eat, or why don't they just stop purging? Right.
So the best one is when somebody says, oh, I wish I had an eating disorder. I love that one.
Like, I can't even with that. I'm sorry. I try to be a passionate, like, kind person as much as possible, but with that comment, and I've heard it all the time. I've heard it. You don't even want to know. But what I try to always stress to them, as I'm sure you do too when you speak, is that yes, it's about food, but it's not. It's about these emotional underpinnings. Right. And what you talked about. What were, you know, so I had some of the most amazing discoveries with my therapist while I was, starting my therapy. And now I still continue to go to a therapist, and they've helped me discover new things. Yes. And it's been absolutely incredible. The things that I've learned about myself, not only perfectionism, which I can totally relate with you on, but also the desire to please others, and to not have confrontation, and to try to have peace. I've always wanted to be a peacemaker and not to upset things, so much so that I will diminish myself, my physically, diminish my emotional needs, all those things, to the point just so that everyone else around me is okay. Which is funny, because I had a very normal childhood. You know, I didn't have a contentious childhood or anything. My parents were amazing. But anyway, those are some of the emotional roots for me. You just mentioned them briefly, but I'd love to hear more in depth on what your emotional roots are. And before you go there, I just want to Karin says, my parents encouraged us to clean our plates because food is A, expensive in Finland, and B, be grateful because some don't have adequate food, which is a really good point. But I think a lot of people were raised with that notion, you know, how do you?
My husband is that way. He will finish food that's sitting, you know, that we haven't finished. And I'm like, why are you doing that? He's like, because it's a waste. I'm like, but you're not still hungry, you know, but it's a pattern that he has gotten into because of the way he was raised. And, you know, you would never put more gas in a car, right? Yeah. It would overflow. It's just gas. And we get it all. Yeah. I mean, we get these messages about food and we get these messages about how we're supposed to eat that, we have to kind of unwind.
Yeah.
So the question you asked me was
about the emotional underpinnings and what they really work for you.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you in terms of therapy. So in the second book that I wrote, Brave is the New Beautiful, right when I first started writing the book, somebody mentioned to me they thought I needed to go back in therapy, and I went kicking and screaming because I had been through years of therapy. I was like, "What's wrong with me? Am I broken again? Like, why do I need therapy?" And now I'll tell you what, I will go to therapy the rest of my life. Everybody should go to therapy. And here's why. It is the one place that I can go and I can just, you know, I want to say barf it all out, but which is not the right word, but I can just, get, you know.
Yeah, of course.
I take my coffee cup, I go in, I just all my junk. And then I leave it there. And she can't gossip about me. She can't go and tell somebody else about me. Like it's the one place that I can go and just, it's my time. It's where I can go and really get it out. And then it's also a place where somebody can reflect back to me and help me. So what I have, in terms of my emotional stuff, I have learned such great learnings from going to therapy about how I numb out, or about how I don't set boundaries, or about my perfectionism or my need to prove my worth. And so for me, those are really the things that were underneath my eating disorder. And I also really believe it's very hard to get to that deeper work when you're still using symptoms. Yeah. So I do believe that there's phases of therapy and treatment. So when I was in treatment, the therapy was really getting me back to life and getting rid of the eating disorder. But now that I'm older and it's been 23 years since I've struggled with an eating disorder, now we're getting to why I needed the eating disorder, which was some trauma, some really difficult inability to deal with my emotions, and an inability to accept who I am. So I do think there's phases in terms of treatment and recovery, but I highly recommend everyone find a great therapist because it really is helpful.
Right, absolutely. And just want to piggyback on that and say, if you are looking for someone and don't know of a therapist in your area, if you go onto the Eating Disorder Hope website, we have state-by-state pages with therapists listed from a wide variety of different levels of care. So if you are looking for someone, we have a directory and we have therapists there. So if you're looking for someone, and some of them do telehealth, we'll do Skype sessions. So utilize that resource that's there for you.
Yeah, that's great.
So we talked a little bit about the roots. How do you deal with difficult emotions now? Because emotional regulation is hard.
Yes.
And after you're not using symptoms or behaviors anymore.
Right.
I know for myself, I still deal with it. And I've got kind of my things that I do that I know will help me process through difficult emotions and sit with them. What are some of the techniques that you use or that work for you?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I was thinking about this yesterday. I remember in the beginning being so terrified because when you've numbed yourself out for so long and then you start to have emotions, I was afraid that I would start crying and never stop because I hadn't cried over some really awful things that had happened. And I was so afraid if I got angry, I'd get so angry, I'd never stop. So I just want everyone to know that that's completely normal. And then the other piece was, as I started in the beginning, just really starting to have emotions and starting to really allow them, I remember one time I was at IKEA, and I remember my therapist saying,
probably not a great place to practice emotional regulation. It like can make me so frustrated. So that's brilliant.
So I'm at IKEA. I've got 3 kids under the age of 5. And I had just come from a therapy session where my therapist said, you need to be, I'm a pretty bold person, but I'm not bold when it comes to my own emotions. And she's like, you need to stand up for yourself more. You need to speak up more in terms of your emotions. So I just come from that. And so I was practicing. So I'm at IKEA. I've got my 3 boys under the age of 5 in a cart, and I'm waiting to put them in childcare because IKEA has this big like childcare thing. And like this woman cut in front of me and I lost my, excuse my language, I lost my shit. I like just went kind of crazy on her, like, what are you doing? You know, and like, and my kids were like this. And it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, yep. Yep, I'm practicing standing up, because she really did. She cut in front of me. I had been waiting there for a long time. That is not,
wasn't a New York City IKEA.
I know, seriously.
It felt like a Minnesota IKEA.
I know, because Minnesota is usually Minnesota nice. Well, I wasn't being Minnesota nice, but I hadn't. It was a new emotion for me to be able to stand up, and I was practicing, and it came out sideways. So I often tell patients that too, like, you know, when they get upset on the unit or something, and especially when you've been rigid and perfectionistic and then all of a sudden you blow up like that. I was like, am I going to keep doing this? Am I going to just like be this crazy person who just like lets it all out? But what I had to realize is that it's going to come out sideways in the beginning. It's going to come out a little wonky, and I had to let it out. And so for me, I try and notice, you know, when I know my own signals now, when I'm starting to feel panicked, I know when I'm starting to feel sad, I know I'm learning my own emotions and how my body reacts, and then doing the things I need to do. So for example, it's not an option for me to skip meals ever. I made that vow with myself 20 something years ago. It's not an option. So I don't care if I'm sad, angry, whatever, I still eat. So that helps me to not use food as a coping skill. And then I have other coping skills. I journal, I call a friend, I go for a walk with my dog. I really like, and I know this is weird, but like, I have a hand sander, and I like to sand furniture. And so that's something that helps me kind of like get my anger out when I'm feeling really frustrated. So I'm always working on pieces of furniture where I can like use the little hand sander and I just get it out.
That's a really fabulous idea.
Yeah, it helps. It helps. So that helps me, or painting. I'll start painting a room or start doing a project, but whatever it is, finding other options. So if you say to yourself, it's not an option, right? I can't purge. It's not an option. Then you're left with finding another option, a healthy coping skill. But if you say, if you start saying to yourself, and I always say that this is the dangerous phrase in your head, should I, shouldn't I? Should I, shouldn't I? That's when you know you're in trouble.
Yep.
Right? Should I skip this meal? Should I purge? Shouldn't I? Should I cut? Should I do when you start hearing those words, it's like an alarm going off in your car. And it means you call someone, you reach out for help. Because when you start saying it's not an option, then you have to find a better option, one that's not going to harm you and one that's not going to harm others, if that makes sense. So I started doing that early on. And I know in my head, when I start going, should I go do this? Then I'm like, oh, there's that trigger word again, you know? That's
a really, really great thing to point out. Thank you for that. That's excellent. Karen has a thought, and this is actually a really great question for you. She says, is gluttony a sin? Thoughts? I know you probably have a lot of thoughts on that. I know I have thoughts, but
what do you think? What do you think?
Well, obviously there's like the 7 deadly sins, which are more Catholic in their tradition, where there's no, if you're looking at this from like a Christian perspective, there's no like 7 deadly sins in 2 Corinthians chapter whatever. But I think that, like, if you're looking at something just objectively, well, yes, gluttony would be a sin. But But I think what we're looking at is ways that, like, if you're looking at it from a Christian perspective, an eating disorder is an idol. It's elevating our food behaviors and the rituals surrounding food, whether it's restriction and purging, binge eating, a combination of all of those, over exercising. It's putting an eating disorder, it's making the eating disorder an idol. Right. And whether it's gluttony or wrath or selfishness or covetousness or anger or any of those things, all of those are just different representations of different idols that we create for ourselves to worship, because we are creatures that are made to worship, to put our focus somewhere, to put our love somewhere, to put our passion somewhere. And when you put it towards food, towards an over concentration and unhealthy obsession with dealing with emotions through controlling your food and weight behaviors, then that's an idol. So of course, there's all kinds of things, and we talked about this. You know, we're broken human beings, so that means that not only are our bodies flawed, but our minds are flawed too. And so there's a combination of genetics, biology, and environmental circumstances that lead into susceptibility to struggling with certain things more than others. But insofar as like gluttony per se, I think that it's just an example of an idol that we choose to pursue rather than things that are healthy. And if you are someone of a Christian faith, rather than pursuing God. So that would be my answer. Great question, Karin. She's always so thoughtful. So thank you. It's a great question. Lee, how about you? What do you think about that?
I think we are living in a culture right now that's very fractured in terms of faith. And I think we spend so much time in our culture right now talking about what's right and what's wrong and what's a sin and what's not a sin. And it breaks my heart because when I was in treatment, I proclaim a faith, a Christian faith. But when I was in treatment, people would say to me, your body is a temple. Mm-hmm. And you know what that did to me? That made me feel such deep shame because, okay, if my body's a temple, then why can't I take care of it? Or they would say to me, if you would just pray, you would be healed. And I wasn't healed. So then I felt like God didn't love me. So I think over here in the theology world, we could talk about what is and what isn't a sin. In my life, I don't care. And I'm not saying I don't care about sin. I don't care. I don't know if I don't care is the right thing. I believe that when I get to heaven, Jesus is not going to say to me, you did this, 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 and this. He's going to say to me, did you love me and did you love my people? And so if I see somebody who is struggling with overeating, I don't believe I have the right to say to them, you're gluttonous. Yes. I believe that my job is to love them. And I think we need a lot more of that in this world. We have so much division, and I would love to see people just saying, oh my gosh, if you're overeating, it sounds like something's going on. And how can I help you? And then my other thing is just asking somebody. I just wish our world, instead of this kind of like, is this right or is this wrong? And the reason I say that is because I dealt with so much shame from the faith culture because I couldn't get better. And I then had a really misguided view of God, that God was punishing me or that God was judging me, when I really feel like God is just sitting there and he's saying, you're my child and I love you. And all I want is for you to just come to me and let's work on this together. But when I'm being, a lot of Christianese or a lot of pithy answers are being thrown at me, it just put me into shame. So what I care about more is if somebody is overeating, is that they get help so that they can become the person that God created them to be, so that they can enjoy food the way it's meant to be in communion with others. And I would love if our culture, like on Twitter and everything, I would love if somebody would just say, instead of like, oh, that's a sin, or, oh, you're doing this right and wrong. I'd love if somebody would just say, you know what? Help me understand. Help me to understand what this is like for you. If you're like an alcoholic, like instead of like, you're doing this and you need treatment, how about help me understand what this is like for you? Let me into your world. And that's how we connect in community, and we connect as people, and that's how we heal. So that's kind of how I feel about that. I
think it's so good. And I know I felt the same way when I was in recovery, that there must be something wrong with me, as something wrong with my faith, something, and it was interesting. I mean, thank God I had a really, really good girlfriend, like one of my best friends in the world, who was also in my church, who was struggling with an eating disorder at the same time. So like our families had to confront it together.
Yeah.
And she was a church friend. And but at the same time, like that's when I really discovered grace. And I don't know if I could have really understood grace, but it was through my own study and my own relationship with God, not other people from the outside.
Right.
Shaming me. And that's the thing. Like, I think faith, whatever your faith tradition is, but from my beliefs, that what it gives you is an undergirding, rather than to say, this is a sin, this is not a sin, this is right, this is wrong.
Right.
But an undergirding to say, no, it's actually about so much more than that. It's about the condition of your soul and your heart. And that all these other things are just leaves on the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get to the root.
Yes. And I agree with you too. And just that, like, in my books, I write about my faith only because it's a part of me. It's a part of my story, not because I think it has to be that exact, like I said before, that exact recipe for you. But right. I will say, for me, without faith, because I grew up in such a shame culture, and I grew up in this "you're not good enough" thing. I don't know how I would have done it without believing that somebody's out there that loves me. Because I had so much self-hatred, and sometimes still do. And so it helps. It's like my life raft of just knowing, you know what, there's something bigger out there that says you're my child.
Yeah.
And you're my beloved, and I will search the world for you. That to me is much gentler and softer and kinder than this, oh, it's a sin, oh, you're this, you're that kind of mentality.
Absolutely. We are getting so many actually really great comments and questions about this topic. It's interesting. It's hitting home with a lot of people. Two things. So I'm going to get to Sarah's question first, and then Brittany, also thank you so much for sharing what you did. I'm going to get to that one next. So just hold on here. So Sarah said, in a few days, I've been in recovery for 6 months and I still struggle with thoughts. I just don't act on them, but it's so hard. When does it start to get easier?
It will start to get easier. I promise. I promise.
Yes.
I promise. What I have found in my own life and in working with patients is that the thoughts are the last to go, right? So there really are the last to go. The thoughts and the body image stuff are usually the last to go, but keep working, keep doing it, because what you're doing is you're creating a new pathway in your brain. Your brain, there was a time in your life when you didn't have those thoughts. Somewhere a new pathway was created, and then those thoughts, like if you imagine a pathway in the forest, you created that, or the thoughts created that pathway. So now you're trying to create a new pathway. Well, nobody goes through a forest and creates a path without taking down some trees. So it takes time for the brain to create a new pathway of thoughts, belief systems, and things like that. And then the other thing I would say, and this is what I do in my own life when I start to have, I don't really have eating disorder thoughts anymore, but I'll have thoughts about like very self-shaming or self-hatred thoughts. I imagine it like when you go to the airport and you watch your luggage come around. Well, you don't pick up somebody else's luggage. You just, you watch it go around, right? You're like, where is that person? That big pink bag is going around. Where are they? But you never pick it up. So those thoughts are not yours to pick up, but you can see them and watch them go by, right? And just say, there it is again. And you wave at it. There's that luggage, but that's not my luggage. My luggage is the one that says, I deserve recovery. I deserve to be here. I have a life that's worth living. That's my luggage. So I think when we, if I told you to drive down the street and not look at every red car, you would look at every red car. So when we say, don't have thoughts, then you're going to have thoughts. So instead, acknowledge that you have thoughts, wave at those thoughts as the big pink luggage, and then move on. And what you're doing is you're creating, and the research shows you're creating a new pathway in your brain. And that new pathway will happen. And you'll look back and you'll be like, I don't have those thoughts anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't have the thoughts that I used to have anymore because that pathway has trees that have grown up.
Yes, that actually does work. And it's a brilliant example. And Sarah too says, I love that. So
thank you.
that was really great. That's the one thing that is just so awesome about having authors on. You guys always have such wonderful visuals that you give us. Like the luggage. I love it.
Oh yeah, but it's so funny. The patients I work with who know me really well, they're like, don't give me another analogy. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm giving you another analogy.
No, I love it. The pink luggage. So let's talk about this one. Brittany says, being a Proverbs 31 woman to me, in the muck of my 25 plus year struggle with anorexia and bulimia, tells me that I'll never be good enough. I'll never be that woman. My faith is such a grounding grace and such a source of shame. Been there, felt that with Proverbs 31. So you are definitely not alone in there, Brittany. And for those of you who might not know what she's referring to, there's a chapter in Proverbs, which is a wisdom book. It's just exactly what it says. It's Proverbs. And the very last chapter of Proverbs is just verse after verse after verse of basically what an ideal woman would be or what an ideal wife would be. And it's encouraging in some parts. And also you get to the end of it and you're like,
I can't measure up.
Can probably be that. So that's just a little background to that.
So what I would say, Brittany, too, is a phrase that I actually have been saying a lot to myself. Lee and Brittany, why are you spending so much time trying to prove something that's already been proven? And that is that I'm good enough just as I am. That's already been proven. Jesus already paid the price for that. If you're a believer, so why do I need to spend so much time proving that? Those are things to strive for. Yeah, but we don't do them on our own. And I am a hot mess. So I would love a chapter in the Bible that says, hot mess, here we are. And by grace, we are still loved and adored just as we are. So in my own life, I struggle with that too. Like, oh, I could be all these things and I do this and I do that. And I think you just get yourself in this shame spiral. And what I would encourage you to do is to instead read the parts that talk about, not that you get rid of that, that is something to aspire to, but that's something that we don't do on our own. You do it through asking the Holy Spirit to do that through you. But then also recognizing that we're broken and it is through our weakness that God shines the greatest. Even today, before I had a radio interview before this and then coming on here, and I have been struggling with a lot of very self-shaming thoughts, some jealousy, some frustration and disappointment. And I said that before out loud to God. I just said, you know what? When I'm weak, you're strong. Right? That is true. That's scripture. When I am weak, you're strong. So this is an awesome opportunity. I'm giving you, God, this awesome opportunity to work through me because I'm a hot mess right now. And I'd rather live like that instead of walk around being like, I'm a Proverbs 31, this beautiful woman, because I'm not. I'm just a human being trying to live my life, trying to love God and trying to love people. And my favorite is Henry Nouwen. He wrote the book. Oh, I have it right here. Life of the Beloved. And it is I keep it everywhere. I have it highlighted. It is just all about how we are loved. And when we can start to feel loved by God, then we can love others.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, but that's just kind of my own perspective on that.
I think that's so helpful. And I want to offer them too. I heard a really, really good talk on Proverbs 31 that pointed out two things. One, pointed out that this is a chapter, King Lemuel, whoever King Lemuel was, I'm not exactly sure, but his mother-in-law or some woman in his family, hold on, let me get my exposition right.
You go, girl.
Hold on. We are going to bring it up right here. You guys, I'm so glad that you guys are all talking because this is super, okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is gonna rock your world because it rocked mine. Okay.
Yeah.
Proverbs 31 starts with the sayings of King Lemuel, an inspired utterance his mother taught him. Okay, so this is what his mom is saying, like, hey, this is the kind of wife you should have. So first of all, like, what daughter-in-law ever lives up to their mother-in-law's expectations?
Right, exactly.
Never. Listen, my son. Listen, son of my womb. Listen, my son, the answer to my prayers. And then she goes on to talk about this is a wife of noble character. Okay, so it's to her son. It's a mother saying this. It's another woman saying this, which is interesting in and of itself, and the expectations that we place on other women. But it's the mother saying this to the king, number one. So that is important. This does not stand, I deserve in a wife. So context is important. The second cool thing about this is that, first of all, you see this example in a woman nowhere in the Bible. In like actual real women, it's nowhere in the Bible. And if you look at the women in the Bible, Esther, Rahab, Deborah, who was a prophet, and she was a prophet in the Old Testament, and she led like troops into battle. Jael's wife, who said to the opposing ruler's king, like, oh, come in here to my tent, like everything will be fine, the leader of the opposing army. And then she like drove a nail into his head and killed him, right? So, same with Mary Magdalene, just there are countless women throughout scripture who are imperfect. No one lives up to the Proverbs 31 woman. But, and in the talk, it said that like the example of, a perfect woman who's not going to exist on this earth is the Proverbs 31 woman for a woman. Who would be the perfect example for a man? It would be Jesus. Well, no man is ever going to be Jesus, obviously,
Well, and
if we try to expect a man we're in a relationship with, or a father or a brother or a friend to be like Jesus, that's a crushing expectation because they never will be. It's the same way with the Proverbs 31 woman. It's a crushing expectation which never will be. Just like a man can never be Jesus, a woman could never be Jesus, or a Proverbs 31 woman. So it's important to look at it from that context, and then
I can even say, as the mother of 3 boys, like I'll tell you, I have a long list of that. I would say that I want. If I wrote that, no woman would ever be able to live up to that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
Yeah, no, and then just the one last thing is I love Peter. Like I also think that it's important for us to have. Like I have people that I look up to in scripture, heroes that are both male and female, because I think that's important. Just like I want the men in my life to say like, wow, Rahab was a phenomenal woman. Like that's a role model for me. I don't just think that, women role models are just for women and male role models are just for males. I can look up to men too. Men should look up to women. But
I like that.
I love Peter because Peter was screwed up. I mean, gotta love Peter. He like one minute was like, yeah, like I'm your biggest follower. I love you more than anyone, all that kind of stuff. And then the next moment, Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan. Like, get behind me, like, get away from me. At the same time, he was his greatest follower. And then sure enough, he denied him 3 times when the going got tough and the pressure was hot, even to the point of like very, like with vitriol, really denying him, right? And so it's just...
He's human.
He was so human. He was so imperfect. And I think that just goes to show that God's love, real God's love, not what the church says is God's love. So like God's love and not the church's love, is accepts us even though we're broken. Of course, yeah, he calls it, we want to be better all the time, but I mean, there were very, very broken people throughout scripture.
But I think what you're talking about though too is we can talk about this and we can say there's all these broken people and this is what prompted me, and I know we've had this discussion before on your other radio thing, but this is what prompted me to write the second book, Brave is the New Beautiful, was because here I had just put this memoir out that talked about cutting, suicide attempt, and an eating disorder. And I live in this community where I would go to my kids' school functions and nobody looked like they had any problems. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just wrote this book about all my stuff, and these women are going to they're not going to invite me over for play dates. They're not going to, they're all going to run away from me. And I really felt that way because when I look out at the school carnival, I did not see any broken women. I saw women who were beautiful and looked like they had it all together. So I was like, I need to dig deeper here because what I'm seeing, and the same with Instagram. Instagram is the exact same way. Like, this is not, something's deeper. And, we compare our highlight reels we compare our behind the scenes to everyone's highlight reels. So I started digging deeper and asking the questions, tell me your story. And when I did, I found that everyone's got a story and everyone's struggling. And that's why I wrote Brave, was because I realized, you know what, everyone is fighting a battle that you don't know about. Even, you look at somebody and you think they've got no problems, I mean, it's amazing to look at you. I mean, you're so beautiful, how do you have problems, but yet we all do that, don't we? We all do that as women. And I just wanted us to take a step back and say, oh no, we all do. And actually the name of the book was supposed to be called Me Too. That's what I pitched it as. And they changed the title because I believe there is power when we can say, you feel uncomfortable, me too. Or you feel like you don't measure up, me too. Not that we live in that self-pity, but that we as women come alongside each other and say, I'm struggling too. Let's hold hands and do this together. And I think when we look at Proverbs 31 and we look at it alone and we're like, oh, I can't measure up. And then we go to our kids' school functions and we see these women, or we walk around and then we're like, see, I don't measure up. I think that's not how we're meant to be. That is not. And I just, as you're talking about that, I want to read this. I found this in the Henry Nouwen book. The first step to healing is not a step away from the pain, but a step towards it. When brokenness is in fact just as intimate a part of our being as our chosenness and our blessedness. And then when you think about the, dialectic that both can be true, you can be broken and healed. You can be a hot mess and be a Proverbs 31 woman, because it's not our job to do it. It's coming from our saved grace from Jesus.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to mention and point out too, because there's some discussion going on in the comments and I want to leave it in the comments, but is that I think sometimes the world sees, when we have this kind of conversation, because we're empaths, right? Yeah. I'm an empath. I can tell you're an empath. And a lot of people that are involved in and end up, practicing in the mental health field are empaths. That's what they care about first and foremost. And there's another side or certain kind of person who's not necessarily an empath and says, well, why all this talk about brokenness? Yeah. Why all this talk about, we should be on the upward trajectory. We should be always trying to get better, and not from a compulsive standpoint, not from a perfectionistic standpoint, but look at conversations like this about brokenness and say, aren't we just wallowing in it? Oh, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk about that because there has to be a healthy balance, right? And I think it's the way that I've explained it to people, friends, and loved ones who, when I ask how I want to be helped, I say, I know how to fix this. Like, I know where I need to take my thoughts. I've done the therapy and I know how to move forward. How I get there is not by you telling me what I need to change, but by just listening. And as soon as I feel heard and then I have the strength that I know how to move forward and take those steps forward, but I need to feel heard and accepted first. That's just my perspective on it.
Well, and I think you're right. A lot of people do get that term, I'm a hot mess, that we're wallowing in it. And that's not not at all what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think what I am saying is I'd be in complete denial if I didn't admit that I'm human. And when you've lived your life as a perfectionist, nothing ever measures up. So I have to radically accept all of me, and all of me means there's good parts and there's parts that I mess up, make mistakes, and that I can be messy. And when I wrote the book Brave, if you pick it up, I wrote these really hard stories of these women, but every single end of the story is not tied up in a tidy bow. But the reason why these women were so brave is because they have been through hell and back, and they are still trudging forward, becoming better people, getting stronger in their faith, doing what they need to do to become better people despite these awful circumstances. And to me, that is the most beautiful thing I see in a woman. And that's what I mean when I when I went to my kids' school and saw these women, I knew there was more to the story, and I wanted to hear more. So that's why I asked this question, help me understand. But the crazy thing about all of it is every single woman I interviewed for the book, I asked them all, do you think you're brave? Not a single one said they were brave. And I'm looking at him going, are you kidding me? What you've been through, and that you get up every day and you have a smile on your face, you're brave to me. So it leads me to a different point, which is that when we can step out and keep fighting and do what we need to do to become better people and admit our brokenness and move forward, we show another woman that they can do it too. And that is what I think is true beauty. I think that when I see a woman who's like, I've had this and this and this happen to me, but you know what? I'm going to get up today and I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to go and do the things I'm passionate about. That is beauty that Cosmopolitan cannot show you.
Yeah. Amen, sister.
Amen, sister.
Amen. And you always do. And Karin says many brave women and men go unrecognized. It's so true. And
absolutely.
Didn't every day the ordinary bravery of men and women who never make a magazine cover.
Right.
You mentioned a little bit about all these stories that you talk about in your book, and I put the name of the book on the screen. The second most recent one, which I've read and is fabulous, is Brave and Beautiful. Yeah. And so this is actually this is the longest Facebook Live that we've had with a guest, Lee. And I thank you so much for your perseverance. But we had so many great questions and so many great thoughts and you were just one of the most perfect people to talk about them. So I'm really, really glad that we got so many of those comments and conversations in.
Yeah. Can I go on and respond or?
Yeah. After, when we're done here, absolutely. You can go on Facebook Live and you can, or go to our Facebook page and the video will be there and all the comments. So you absolutely can respond. They would love to hear from you. We have such awesome people who continue to go back and check their comments too. So yeah, definitely, please do. But I'm also going to put the link in the comments to. Is Amazon the best place for people to buy the book?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I would love for you to leave us with a last word, because I know you've talked about this and it's part of the book, especially when you relate the story of going and saying no one else is flawed, but I feel totally flawed. How do we get rid of the comparison? I mean, it's on social media, it's everywhere. It plays such a big role in our sense of self-worth and our identity. How do you fight that? How do you beat it?
I think I am in the last couple of years, I've been really working on that in my own life. And so I'll tell you, I think there's two things. One, whenever I start to feel jealous, I celebrate that girl's success. So if I see somebody I'm jealous of on social media, I will then write up something to cheer them on, because then that helps me, because then I'm moving from jealousy to like encouraging them. And then the other piece is, and this is a new thing that I've been working on, and I think it's really true. I heard it from this, it's a quote, but when you start to feel jealous about somebody, it's usually because you know that you've got that ability in you, right?
Yeah.
So instead of being jealous of them, ask yourself, is this something that I like think I can do, and go and do it. So I'll give you an example. I'm not jealous. I went to get a massage last week. My massage therapist, I'm not jealous of her because I want nothing. I don't like to touch people. So I'm not jealous of her, right? I'm not jealous of people who do math because I'm not good at math. You know who I'm jealous of? I'm jealous of
such a good point. That's
people who are successful authors and people who are successful speakers.
Yeah.
And maybe if I take a step back, that's God saying, hey, you might have that in you. Learn from that person. Let them be your teacher. So then instead of being jealous, I go, how can I learn from that person? And it takes away the jealousy. It really does. Because you're not jealous of somebody who has something you don't want. Like I said, I'm not jealous of a single person out there doing math, doing accounting, like go. I'm not jealous of teachers because I'm a terrible teacher. I would never be a good teacher.
I think you've done some really, really good teaching today.
Thank you. But so ask yourself two things. When you see yourself being jealous, take a step back and say, is that something I'm jealous of because that's something I want? And then how can I learn from them? Or the other is cheer them on. Because once you cheer them on, it almost takes away the power of that jealousy. Yeah. And also remembering that everyone is fighting a battle that you don't know about. So, just because you see this picture, none of us, you don't get to be 40 years old without fighting some sort of battle, right? You just don't.
Or 30.
Yeah.
Or 20.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But really, once you get to your 40s, like you go to your 20-year college or high school reunion, and all of a sudden everyone's a little bit more like real because you're living life and life's not easy.
Amen.
Yeah.
Lee, thank you so, so much. Brave is the New Beautiful is the name of Lee's second book. A Table in the Darkness is her first. Just the kind of authenticity and coolness that Lee has given us so generously over the last hour.
Thank you.
Is exactly what you find in her writing. So I encourage you to check out her book, to give it as a gift to someone who you think might need it and might need to hear her story. So Lee, we're going to say goodbye, and then I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. So stay on board so we can chat afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. So, guys, this was really epic.
Wait, are we still on camera now?
No, I'm on Epic. I'm on camera. You're off.
Okay, good.
Stay there. I'm going to talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying goodbye to everyone. Janine gives a heart. Sam says, this is great. Thank you. Karen, thanks for joining us so much. And Sarah, as always, Elena, for sharing your thoughts. Brittany, this was Jessica. Really, really appreciated your voice. Thank you so much. It totally took a different turn in the conversation. I had all these questions for Lee, and we got to what exactly you needed to hear. And that's what we want to do. And that's the time that I want to spend on these episodes, is answering these really, really difficult, challenging things that are impacting all of our lives. I feel the pressure too. I felt shame and guilt. I still struggle with it. I still struggle with these things as well. I don't let them influence my eating and weight control behaviors, but I definitely still struggle with these things. We all do in some way, shape, or form. And I think what is so helpful is sharing and being vulnerable and being authentic, because like I said, that I will leave and turn off this episode and I will feel more strength knowing there is a community of women who also feels these things, but is going out there stronger every day, continuing to put one foot in front of the other, continuing the challenge of self people around her, and celebrating other women in their victories and finding strength and drawing so much strength from that. So I just want to offer my gratitude for all of you. This was a really, really inspiring chat for me as well. And for Elsa, she's just so happy. She's just napping, but I'll wake her up to say goodbye. Okay. Bye everyone. Elsa says ciao. Of course, if you want to share this episode, please feel free. It's going to be tagged to the top of our Facebook page for the rest of the week, and it'll be on our YouTube channel as well. and we'll be back for another episode. We'll be back for another episode of Weekly Hope next Wednesday. Love you all. Thank you for being a part of this community. We'll see you next week. Ciao.